Hello there, fellow human. Today we're going to figure out what tank is better, the WoTB or the T62A. Let's get into it. First, let's have a look at the stats and then let's play them. 62A starts off with an immediate advantage of having 5mm more standard penetration and having 10mm more premium penetration, and then that does continue through with the 62A having better aim time, however marginally worse dispersion, and 1 degree more gun depression. However, what the Object 140 sort of wins out is the mobility, but only slightly. Here we have 39.9 and here we have 39, which is basically, you won't notice the difference. The same with the 54 traverse speed and the 56 traverse speed of the 62A. 62A is better here again, but you're not really going to notice the difference. And even the credit coefficient works for the 62A only by 1%, but it's still there. And the view range is a thing that the Object 140 does slightly better, but then it has 100 less hit points for whatever reason. Now, can the armor save the Object 140? The short answer, no. The long answer, the 62A does have turret armor, it does have very tiny cupolas, and hull armor that is sometimes useful, but not really reliable. So you can use it sometimes at possibly extreme angles, but for the most of the time, the hulls are very easily pennable. However, the turret is somewhat strong, but still pennable nonetheless. And oh boy, does it get worse. While the Object 140 has an equally useless front plate that is only good for extreme angles, the turret is just absolutely miserable. It's got this tiny bar down here that is somewhat of the same thickness of the 62A, but you can still pin it right next to the gun. But then looking at the top, it is just absolute and utter paper up here, and the cupolas are massive as well, which means this vehicle isn't just worse at pretty much just the gun and the mobility, it's also worse in terms of the armor. Now, before we go into the gameplay, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video and if you haven't done that already. Now, as you probably already noticed, the 62A is the better one. Not only does it have better armor, somewhat better mobility, or at least equal, and also more penetration. So, yeah, I don't know why they did that to the Object 140 specifically. They just completely ruined it. If you don't know, back in the day when I was still young and happy, in 2014, 2015, I mean, I'm happy, but I'm not young. So, back in that time, the beginning of World of Tanks Blitz tournaments started off with 5 IS-7s, 2 Object 140s. Something like that, that was the standard strategy. You obviously don't see that anymore at all. So, the Object 140 is possibly the tank that has fallen the highest of all tier 10s in the game. And that is quite sad because it does have a lot of potential, or had a lot of potential. Now, it's a bit ruined. Now, get back to the 62A though, because obviously, Object 140 gameplay is after this. This vehicle, it's got something in it. Now, personally, I don't really see a point in these vehicles, because if I want to go hull down, if I want to play brawly, I'll go for a leopard, right? I'm good enough to not be bothered by the lack of armor, so I'll just go for the Leo and have a lot better time using the great and absolutely excellent gun of the Leopard 1. Now, this thing's by no means inaccurate, but I think the Leopard gun is just that slight bit more snappy. At least it feels that way. Now, there's still a solid reason to pick up this vehicle anyway, and that is if you already have the STB-1, the FE-4202, the E50M, and the Leopard 1. Then there's still a sufficient reason to pick this thing up. Now, having the lowest alpha damage in tier 10 isn't really helpful, because the less alpha damage you have, the more times you obviously have to expose yourself towards the enemy, which isn't really helpful at all. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to play this thing in a either role where the enemy can't shoot you because you're behind them, or where you can just peek twice every time the enemy shoots. That's one of the big advantages of a vehicle like this, that the reload is only 5.6 seconds, so not only can you perma-track some people, that you can just hold them in one place by tracking them, obviously, and you can also just sometimes just shoot twice if the enemy stays peaked for that long enough. That's the advantage of having a low alpha damage gun like this one. Would I pick this thing over like an E50M or a Leopard 1? Of course not. It's been pushed into a corner. They're not really as relevant and amazing anymore. There are tanks that do most of the roles that they do better. This thing, it wins the title of, hey, at least it's not the MX-30B. which already means a lot. That doesn't mean that these tanks are useless and you shouldn't play them, obviously. If you have them, this is my most played tank in the entire game, for a good reason. It's still fun. They can still deliver you quite good performances. But if you're, again, if you're a new player starting out with the game, then this is something you should absolutely keep your hands away of, and vehicles like this in general, and you will be way better off going for something like an STB-1 or an E50M or even an M48 Patton. So, in general, these tanks, they need something. And in the Object 140's case, it's very clear. It either needs to get even faster or receive some armor to be fully competitive again, right? Because it's not by no means a bad tank. I'm not saying that. The problem is, if you're fine and everything else is good, you're trash in that comparison. Like, it can work, but just everything else can work a bit better. Which is a bit sad. And the lack of gun depression does really bite them in the ass. And with a 121, for example, that has an equal lack of gun depression, that thing just has the sheer aim time and brutality of alpha damage that's just going to rescue it out of there. And it also has turret armor, sort of. So that's going to get out of that hole by having something special. The specialty of the 140 and the 62A is low alpha damage. I'm not really a fan of that. So, while they're playable and you can certainly get performance out of them, it's just like, I mean, it's not great, and you're better off with, for example, the FV4002, especially if you're a new player. I really hope that they're doing something to make these more viable, because that's kind of the problem. If you're the same at most things, and then worse at one thing, yeah, well, congratulations, now you have a worse tank. And that's the case for these vehicles. They're just not really competitive in their current state, even though they're not like unplayable garbage, like a 121B or an AMX-30B, because you have to pay for those. For this thing, you don't. That's the difference there. So, don't buy a 121B, don't buy an AMX-30B. There was a time where it made sense, now it's not. No, the 121B, that is, it made sense to buy it like 3 years ago, but now, absolutely not. There are better options on the horizon, especially also with the comeuppance of the KPZ-50T, which is pretty damn solid in its own right, which is also another big problem to the Object 140 and the 62A, because the KPZ-50T, it's got a similar gun, but it just does it better. Again. It's not really, doesn't help, does it? So, how do I bring back the Object 140 back to its glory? Give it its damn turret armor back. Right, I understand taking away some of the features it had, but you can't take away multiple things of a vehicle and still expect it to be well. They rebuffed the 205B, they rebuffed the T125 after the mistakes that were made to those vehicles. This thing needs the turret back, because otherwise you don't have any armor. And at that point, you're way better off with a quicker, snappier Leopard 1. As far as the 62A goes, that's fine. I would definitely recommend the 62A over the Object 140 in the current state. However, in terms of priority of what you should grind, these are pretty low on the list. With that said, do you agree? Do you not disagree? Put it in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. See you next one.